Let's face it, we all wear masks. Some are stitched by pain. Some are sculpted by others' expectations. Some masks, they are painted with applause and praise. But no matter how beautiful or tough it may look on the outside, all have a hidden price tag that most don't know the cost of until it is too late. You've tuned into part 3 of my testimony, The High Cost of False Identities. One you don't want to miss. Welcome back to Godly Alpha. It's your boy, Coach Wulu, and I am so thankful that you guys have come back to the channel. I hope you have enjoyed part 1 and part 2. I know I've gotten a lot of feedback from different people, and I appreciate the love and the support as I share with you how the grace of God has been manifested in my own life. But as was stated, the title for part 3 of my testimony is The High Cost of False Identities. In my life, I wore many different masks: hustler, artist, wannabe tough guy. And each identity promised to protect me, promised to provide something that I felt that I did not have. But unfortunately, the life that I thought I was building was really a prison that I was building, and the mask that I was wearing nearly destroyed me. And I want to talk to you about the high cost of wearing false identities tonight. So welcome once again. What's really interesting is, a lot of the masks that we wear hide pain. And we wear these masks thinking that it will hide whatever it is that we don't want people to see. But in the end, that mask that we wear to hide, it really ends up costing us something in the end. And so, where I had left off in part 2 of my testimony, bitterness blossoms, the rebellion years, I ended off, about the age of 15, just, where I was in life, at that time, near-death experiences and how God had, really preserved me during that time. And I just want to pick up and just skip a year forward to the age of 16, when I thought that I was about to become a father. Now, if you tuned into part 1 of my testimony, I became sexually active and involved at a really young age. And, one of the things that really, stuck with me is because of the experience that I had in not being in a 2-parent home and the effect that it had on me and the desire for a father. I remember I had some homies who had kids and they really weren't in their kids' life. And I just remember saying to myself, like, man, I was like, I don't know how they do that. Because, even back then when I wasn't walking with Christ, even back then, to me, it was such a strange thing for a man to have a child and he wasn't in that child's life. And I just remember vowing to myself, I said, if you ever have a whoopsie baby, baby that you weren't intending on having, I said to myself that I would be in that child's life, and that I didn't want to be one of those fathers that wasn't present. And so, unfortunately, if you remember in part 2 of my testimony, I was saying that, I went to church, not because I was looking for Jesus, but because I was looking for the girls that were there present. And, I ended up hooking up with a girl while I was there. And this was during the time that I was on the run, for those 4 years that I told you about, from about the age of 14 to 18. And I disappeared for a number of months from that church, hadn't really gone back. And then I just reappeared like, you know, maybe, I don't know, 3 months or something after I hadn't been there. And I remember I saw one of my little homies there, and he said, "Hey, yo, man," he said, "somebody looking for you, and they saying they got your baby." I'm like, "Okay, nobody saying they got my baby." And then he mentioned the girl's name, and I instantly remembered who she was. And I knew that when I had been with her, I had been unprotected, and so I was really wondering, like, wow, could this girl be pregnant with my baby? And so he gave me the number that she had left behind, and man, I'm calling that number, and I'm not getting anybody. And so, I'm searching for this girl, and I can't find her. Long story short, I end up seeing her at a gas station that I would frequent, and it was a gas station and a fast food place in one. So I walk into the gas station, and over on the fast food side, guess who I see working at the cash register? It's old girl. And so by this time she is like 8 months pregnant. I mean, just very, very much pregnant at the time. And I remember she walked up to me and grabbed my hand and put it on her belly. And she said, "We're gonna have a boy." And I kind of pulled my hand back, and I'm like, how you know it's mine? And so anyway, she told me why she thought it was mine. And at the time, like, the dates matched up. But when she told me when the baby was going to be born, which she didn't even know my birthday, but she told me the baby was going to be born on September 20th. And I was like, yo, that's my birthday. So, I mean, it was like, I knew I was unprotected. It was like the months matched up, and the baby's going to be born on my birthday. I'm like, this is just like too much coincidence. And so anyway, I became involved, came back involved with the girl again. And I was with her, expecting to be present for the birth of this baby. I mean, literally, my hand is on her stomach. I'm feeling the baby move. And what was terrifying initially, because I'm like, I remember thinking to myself back then, I'm like, you're a kid and you're about to have a kid. I'm 16 years old, but I had made up my mind that I was going to be present. So you remember, at this time, I'm on the run. And so I end up getting locked up because I get caught again. And I get locked up just a couple months before my birthday. And on my birthday, the day of my birthday, while I'm locked up in juvenile detention, I remember thinking to myself and happily telling everybody, I was like, my son was born today. So I get out of lockup. I go and look for old girl. Can't find her. I'm looking everywhere. I'm looking at all the spots that we used to frequent, and I can't find her at all. And so I end up seeing her a couple months later at the mall. And I remember seeing her, and I walked up to her, and I said, "Where's my son?" And there was this guy that was behind her, and he said, "You better tell him the truth." And I said, "Listen, I don't know what this brother talking about. All I want to know about is, where is my son?" And she looked me dead in my eyes, and she said, "It's not your son." I'm like, "What you mean it's not my son?" I'm like, "The months match up. He was born on my birthday." And she said, "It's actually Barry's son." Now, what I had known at the time was that she was cheating on her boyfriend with me. And, but I didn't believe her. So I said, "Give me Barry's number." And a matter of fact, I forgot to mention this. She told me that she had lost the child to Child Protective Services, and that this guy Barry was trying to get him out of Child Protective Services. But I didn't believe her. I was like, "Listen, I gotta hear this for myself. I can't have a child in this world that potentially could be mine without me confirming whether or not this child is mine." And so she gave me Barry's number, and I gave him a call. And sure enough, brother said, "The kid is mine." And I'm like, how do you know it's yours? He said, "Because I took a DNA test, And I'm in the process now of getting the child out of Child Protective Services. Now, this was really bittersweet. It was bitter because, I mean, I named the child. I'm feeling the child move in the womb. I mean, I'm having all of these experiences. I had become, you know, used to the fact that I was about to be a father. So that was the bitter part. The sweet part was knowing that I was being given another opportunity to not create another broken home. And for that, I truly was grateful. And so, you know, this experience, while it wasn't pleasant, sometimes the mercy of God looks like heartbreak. I'm going to repeat that. Sometimes the mercy of God looks like heartbreak. Some of the things that break our hearts is actually the mercy of God in disguise, keeping us from something that would have been far worse. So I continue on. Finally, I end up, I'm just on the verge of aging out of the juvenile system. And because I hadn't been caught for any adult charges, I was on the verge of aging out of the juvenile system. And so I'm 17 now, on the run again, selling drugs. And, I never forget, the mercy of God that just really watched over me and protected me all of these years. So I'm in the house and I'm selling cocaine out of this house. Now, mind you, the girl that I was staying with at the time, she had gotten evicted from that apartment, but she still had a number of days left on her lease before she had to fully be out. And because there was no lights in the apartment, imagine there's a couch right here, and just around the corner is the front door. And so I'm sitting here, and in my lap, I got bags of cocaine all over the place. And I got a candle, and I'm using some of the light that's coming from the outside. And as I'm sitting there bagging up this cocaine, I remember just so distinctly, I hear a voice in my head say, "Close the door." I was like, "Close the door." Like, it was just the thought that came into my head, but I kept bagging up the cocaine. And it's like I heard the voice again, "Close the door." And so this time I heeded. I actually got up, went around the corner, and actually closed the door. And it literally was like only about 5 minutes later that I heard a knock at the door. And I said, "Hey, go get the door." I'm thinking it's a customer. And so, the girl, she goes to the door, and as soon as she opens the door, I hear 75 just right over the bar. And I knew it was Follow. I knew it was the police. And so, man, I am nervous as all get out. I am trying to, because it's literally just around the corner where the front door is. It's like, imagine there being a wall right here, and at the end of the wall, you go around the corner, and that's the front door. So I'm literally on the other side of that wall, sitting on a couch with all of this cocaine in my lap, and 5-0's at the door, police is at the door. And so I began trying to put all of this cocaine back into the little box that I had it in. And I am literally trying to think of how I can escape. So I stuff everything underneath the couch, and I'm listening to the conversation that the girl that I'm with, that she's having with the police. And I hear him talking to her saying, it's been reported that that this apartment is not supposed to have anybody living in it, and that it had people evicted from it. And luckily, she had her purse. Not let me not say luckily. Providentially, she had her purse like literally right there near the door, which had the letter from the apartments in it saying what time she had to be out of the apartment. And she literally grabbed the letter out, she showed it to the police officer, and he said, "Okay, have a good day." And he left, and she closed the door. I sat there, I think, for about 30 minutes in just silence, because I knew just how close I was. Because you see, if I would have left that door open and the police thought that the apartment was vacant and that nobody was supposed to be in there, what you think he would have done when he got to the door? He would have just walked in. And when he would have walked in and saw all of that cocaine on my lap, I would have been locked up far longer than any time that I've ever been locked up before. But I really look back on that and, just see that the mercy of God in not allowing for me to suffer the full consequences of my decisions. And as well as, as you will later find out, even though I got locked up multiple times as an adult, to not end up as a felon. And even that is a miracle story, which I'm going to get to later in this testimony. But you know what's interesting? Instead of seeing the signs of God's mercy, the monuments of his goodness that should have spoke to my senses to stop, I wore it as a badge of pride to continue headlong into destruction, as though the mercy of God was not beckoning me to come home and to turn away from my life of sin. But unfortunately, that's not what I did. And so, around this same time, you know, I, as I've said in both parts of my testimony, you know, I was always looking for a role model, for somebody to look up to, some big homie to look up to and be like, okay, this is what it looks like to be a man. And at the age of 17, I had the unfortunate experience of having uh, a pimp enter into my life. Now, you know, I am thankful by the grace of God that he has saved me from everything from my old life that I entered into. But I'm gonna be honest, this is one part of my testimony that I'm not very proud of, but it is what it is. It's the grace of God has taken me from some dark places in life that things could have even been worse than what they were. So I'm 17. I meet this pimp, and the pimp, I actually meet him at the mall. And, one of the things me and, my boys used to do, we used to go to the mall and see who can get the most numbers. And so I end up meeting this pimp at the mall as I'm getting this girl's number. And, he says to me, like, he said, why are you sleeping with all these girls for free? He said, you should make them work for you. Now, a thought like that had never entered into my mind. Um, and, one of the things I can say is, you know, even though I was out in the streets, running the streets, doing a lot of stupid things, one thing that I can say is, I still have conscience. You know, I have some homies that could do stuff that I just personally couldn't do, because the Spirit of God was still working in my conscience. Now, of course, I kept resisting that, and the voice sometimes got silent. but it still kept me from doing things um that could have been much worse. Not that what I did wasn't bad, but things could have always been much worse. And so anyway, didn't even know where to begin with that type of stuff. So, me and him met these girls at the mall, got their number, and he was the one that got me my first girl, first one. And, you know, um, I was a different kind of person. There was just some stuff I couldn't do. Like, he was real physical with his girls, like slapping them around, stuff like that. That just wasn't in me. And, you know, broken people break people. And, I never forget, I'm with the girl he's gotten for me. And, I remember she says to me one night, she said, if you want me to listen to you, she said, you got to beat me like G beat me. Or excuse me, she said, if you want me to listen to you, you got to beat me like G beat his girls. And, I jokingly, very lightly, slapped her on the face. Just very gently. And she grabbed my hand and she said, no, like this. And she said, if you want me to listen, she said, you got to beat me the way my father used to beat me. And it's crazy. Broken people break people. And broken people oftentimes are attracted to other broken people. And so, very thankful to say that period of my life at that time could have lasted for much longer than what it did. But I'm thankful that illusion of money, control, and power in that area wasn't, even though it did end up happening again later on in my life, it didn't last as long as it could have. It didn't last as long as it could have happened. And so, all throughout this experience, the grace of God is still pursuing me. I almost got caught, lost in the prison system. God shows me mercy, and I still was blind. I was still blind to the goodness of God. I was still blind to all the things that he was trying to do to help me to escape the environments in which I found myself. And so then, at about the age of 16, I'm just going to backtrack a little bit. At about the age of 16, I found that I had a talent for something that I didn't realize I had. Now, back in my early teens, I used to write poetry. So writing poetry was something that I realized I had a skill in very early on, which I got from my brother, because I always tried to imitate everything he did. In this case, I imitated something he did and found out that it was something that I had a natural knack for. And so with poetry, I had this natural progression to music. And music was an extremely seductive mask that I wore. And this mask that I wore, I'm gonna tell you one of the reasons why it was very seductive. It was very seductive because, I was applauded for it. It was something that people gave me kudos for. It was something that I was valued for. I mean, when you drop a track and everybody like, oh, like, you think you really hot, you think you something. But all of these different masks that I was wearing, hustler, wanna be gangster, all of these was really just hiding, wanna be pimp, wanna be, rapper, all of these things that I was doing, it was me really just trying to find myself, in the midst of this crazy, dark, and chaotic world. And I make no excuses for the things that I did, during the course of my life. All I can do is look to the grace of God and thank Him that He has forgiven me for the things that He has saved me from. So, about around this age of 17, I met uh, a group, a crew called Three Verse that was to end up becoming like my second family. I think one of the things that they really satisfied a need that I had at that time, and that was for a group of people. We had a shared interest, and, you know, and I was also accepted, and I was valued for the talent that I had. And there was real love that was shown to me. And of course, again, sense of belonging. You look for somewhere to belong. So I'm accepted into this group, and we are in the studio. Like, literally, we lived at the studio. Our engineer, we literally lived at his house. He had a, what was that thing? I think it was like like a 3 bedroom or something like that. It was just him and his girl. So we literally are at this man's house like all the time, just dropping tracks. And he had his own rock and roll group. And but he was also an engineer, so he was the one that was mixing all of our music and whatnot. And so um then comes, fast forward a little bit. We've been doing music for a couple years. We've been doing shows, and all of a sudden we get we get, you could say like a talent agent that heard our music. Now at this time she had already been promoting other artists, some artists that even had made it, and she hears our music and she loves it. And so even though there are other people that she has been working with for years, a big show was coming up that was going to have, you know artists that I listened to growing up as a kid, and we were going to be opening up for them. And so it was for me like a dream come true, because we're about to be opening for the same group that Tupac came out of, a group called Digital Underground, Shock G, and so anyway, we are at this we're at this club in Phoenix, Arizona. And everybody, the different music sets, are going on, different people are, doing their music. And then it comes time where we are to be the opening act right before Digital Underground come out. Now, our engineer, if you remember, I told you earlier, he was in a rock band. And so we had been practicing with them to do all of our music live. Now, typically what we did is the beats and everything that we created, we typically would just have that all on the track. And if we were going to do a set that night of 3, 4, 5 songs, you would just give the DJ your CD, and the DJ would just, play your tracks, one after the other. But that night was different. We actually had a live band to play our music. And what was so unique about that is because the only other group that night that had a live band was Digital Underground. And so, it was crazy, man. We had this place lit. And so then Digital Underground comes up, playing all of these oldies, like I said, that I was used to listening to growing up. And after their set was over, Digital Underground's manager went to one of my boys, John, and this is what he said to him. He said, "I've been coming to Phoenix for 20 years, and I had never seen a group like you guys." He said, "We are about to go tour in Las Vegas." He said, "Get your album mastered and you can come tour with us." Then there was another brother there who was from California, who, I don't know if the radio station is still around, but it was very well known at the time. And this is in the year, it's 2003. It's 2003. And so another guy, radio station called Big Bear Radio out of California. He heard one of our songs that we had did that night. He said, I love it. He said, get the song mastered. And he said, I'm going to play it on the radio in California. So what me and my group had been working on for years, it was for us, it was like an exciting time, because it's like what we had been working on for years was about to become a reality. And all we had to do was put the pieces in place that, that they were asking us to, and we was going to go on tour with them. Like, this was an exciting time. At least so we thought, because really the applause for which we were seeking was really a prison. Anytime you have to live by the acceptance, the validation, the praise, and the applause of men, that becomes a prison that you have to live in. And you're always looking for validation for people. You're always looking for the praise and the applause of others. And you'll do that your whole life, living by the flattery on people's lips. It's chains, my friends. That's what those are. And so into the midst of this whole thing, God inserts himself again. And there is a divine interruption that he brings. Oh, thanks be to God for divine interruptions. So the crew that I'm in, we are working on, mastering the tracks, getting them all radio ready, and so on and so forth. And into the midst of this, God inserts himself, and my sister gives me a call. Now, at this time, my sister had been a Christian for years, for a number of years by this time. And she was in a Christian program called Master's Commission. Shout out to anybody who's watching this from Master's Commission. And so anyway, my sister calls me. Now, my sister and my dad are dream people. Like, it's just the thing that's just been one of the ways in which God has spoken to them. Like, no joke. And when I tell you, anyway, I wish I could go into every single detail, but I'm going to tell you the dream my sister had. So she had a dream. She called me and she said, hey, bro, she said, I had a dream about you. And immediately I'm like, oh my goodness, what dream this girl had now? Keep me out of your dreams. And so anyway, she says in her dream that I went to the same Christian program that she was in, called Master's Commission. And she said, I believe that this dream was from God, and that this is what God is calling you to do. God is calling you to go into this program. And I said to my sister, I said, listen, we just got finished doing the biggest show of our career to date. We are on the verge of going on tour with Digital Underground. I'm like, I don't got time for God. I said, I want to make some money. And then I said, then maybe after, I become famous and make some money, I said, maybe I'll serve God afterwards. So, my sister, she says to me, she says, pray about it. So a couple weeks passed by. Now, I think it was in part one of my series that I shared with you from about the age of 12. I struggled with depression. It wasn't like every day, but it was like sometimes I would just have this heavy depression, just come over me. And that's exactly what happened. After that conversation with my sister, I don't know if it was a week or two or something, I just had this depressive episode just weigh on me. And I remember I'm feeling depressed at the moment. And I said, and my sister's dream comes back to mind. And I said, okay, God. I said, if this dream is really from you, I said, give me a sign and I'll know that this dream is from you. And so I paused because I wanted to think of something that was to me impossible so that it wouldn't happen so that I could keep doing music. So I paused and I thought about it, and I thought I had a light bulb moment, not knowing that it was probably God that downloaded this thought to my mind. And so I said, okay. I said, if you really want me to go to this program, I said, let me and my group break up as a sign that you want me to go, and I'll know that this dream is from you. And I left it there. To me, I said, impossible. I said, number one, before I even got into music with them, we was like this. Like we was really, really, really close. Like I said, we ate, slept, and breathed music. I mean, we did everything together, literally everything together. And so in my mind, for us to break up was like it's impossible, impossible. Be careful what you pray for. Be careful what you pray for. And so I don't know how long it was after that. I don't know, maybe it was a month or something like that. I remember we had a deep group. Like it was like, yeah, there was a number of us. Anyway, we're all sitting down and we get into a conversation about two things. Number one was when we go on tour, who's going to be our manager? And the lady who had gotten us had gotten us the show with Digital Underground, she wanted to be our manager. And so some were advocating that she should be our manager. Some of the group were for it. Some in the group weren't for it. Some was like, no, we think she money hungry and she gonna, da 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 da. And so there's back and forth on that. We probably would have made it through that. It was the next topic that really had the effect. And so as we were going to be going on tour, the question came up on percentages and who was going to make what. And when that topic came up, man, there ended up being a heated battle on that one because some wanted more money than others. Now, mind you, some of it was because some had invested more money than others. Understand, but there was like this back and forth, and and people was basically like, listen, this album would be nothing without our lyrics on it. So anyway, there was this fighting that ensued, and we broke up. And I never forget, as we're standing on the outside of the engineer's house, and I'm watching two of my friends almost on the verge of having a fist fight. And I remember, as I'm watching this, I remember hearing the voice of God. And he said, is this not what you asked for? And as soon as I heard that voice, my mind went back to the prayer that I had just prayed like a couple weeks before. And I said to myself, like, this can't be. I was like, this is impossible. Like the very thing that I prayed for happened. And so I I had I had made a bargain with God. I had said that if you make this happen, then I'll go to the program my sister's in, not thinking that it was possible. And so God held up his end of the bargain, as he always does. But unfortunately, I didn't uphold my end of the bargain. And now, the one thing that my identity was so centered in, music, was ripped from me. And so I'm thinking like, yo, what do I do? Like, what do I do with my life now? And so, one of my boys who I was in the group with, At this time, they were running shipments of, you know, pounds of marijuana from Phoenix, where there was a surplus, to the Midwest, where there was a drought, and you could buy it at such a low price on the West Coast and take it over to the Midwest and triple and quadruple how much you spent. And so I said, you know what? I said, this is what I'm gonna do. I need to make some money. Because, up to this point, like, music had been like this all consuming thing. I ain't had no job, and so I went back to selling. And, I had a drug dealer that I had known from childhood. Him and his family and some of his friends really, like, ran, like, some of the drug trade in our neighborhood, and they had connections to the Mexican mafia. So he lends me, he lends me some weight. And I remember he was like, if you think this will do good, he said, maybe I should send you with some cocaine. And, I thought about it for a moment. I was like, man, if I get caught with some weed, that's one thing. But I said, if I get caught with a bunch of cocaine, trafficking it across state lines, I'm like, yeah, that's not gonna look good. So I said, nah, I was like, I'm good. I said, I'll just take the weed. That's it. And so I got several pounds of weed to take from the West Coast to the Midwest. And so I'm 19 at the time. My birthday is literally about a week or two away. And I remember my brother, I remember he tells me, even though he was involved in some of the same stuff that I was, not necessarily at that time, but I remember he tells me not to go. And that was probably really God speaking through him. But I went anyway. I wanted to make some money. And so I arrive to Richmond, Indiana. I arrive. And on my 20th birthday, I get caught. For the first time. After all the years on and off that I had been selling drugs, I get caught for the first time. I got caught at my homie's house. Now, what I didn't realize is that prior to me getting there, the police had been surveillancing him and the whole crew that he was out there with. They had already been surveillancing him. So he comes to pick me up, and they had already did a sting on the hotel that he had been staying at. But they didn't find him there because he had left out before they busted the place, busted the hotel room. And he came to pick me up, but they still knew what his car looked like because they had already been scoping it. So he came to pick me up, and in the process of them knocking him, they knocked me, and I get locked up. And I remember, and I ended up getting locked up with more than I was supposed to get locked up with. You see, what ended up happening is they locked him up. They took him to the squad car, and they found more pounds of weed in the house. And they said, whose is this? Now, of course, I didn't say nothing because it wasn't mine. They had already found mine. Mine was in the bag. They had already found it. And this was at his mom's house, mind you. Now, she had just got out of prison from doing 3 years. And his cousin, my friend's cousin, is sitting on the couch. And and I know it's his weight. I know it's his stuff. And so they said, well, Linda, they said, this must be yours. You're going back to prison. And at the corner of my eye, I'm like, are you really gonna let your auntie go to prison? I'm like, just tell him it's yours, you know? And so, but he didn't say nothing. And so I said to myself, I said, I said, they're already gonna lock you up. I said, how much more time are they gonna give you? And so I said, you know what? I said, nah, I said, it's not hers. I said, it's not hers. I said, it's mine. I said, it's mine. And so I ended up getting locked up. And as I remember being locked up, and I'm facing some time because they found it in a Greyhound bag. So they knew that I had trafficked it across multiple state lines. You know what? I didn't even, and I don't even have the time. I didn't even get into the part of the story where on my way on the Greyhound up to Indiana, Border Patrol had come on the bus with canine drug sniffing dogs, and they didn't find it. I mean, like, nothing but the grace of God, nothing but His grace preserving. So anyway, I'm locked up. I'm facing some time, and I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, like, man, they're gonna put you away for a little bit. And I still knew how to pray. I was like, God, I said, if you get me out of this, I said, I'll give my life to you. And so I remember, when I was locked up, everybody want to know what you in for, who's your judge and whatnot. And so anyway, I'm locked up. And they was like, I became cool with somebody. It was like, who's your public defender? And I told them. They was like, ooh, him. They said he'll never held nobody. They said, who your judge? I said, Vince Middleworth. They like, oh man, yeah, man. They said, don't expect to get out of here for at least a year. They're like, he's the worst. He's the worst judge. Don't expect for him to help you out at all. So already in my mind, after hearing it from more than just one person, that I don't have the best public defender, and that the judge that I'm gonna go before isn't the best judge. In my mind, I was already settling in my mind that I was going to be locked up for a period of time. So, so time goes by. I'm locked up. I'm entering into my 3rd month, and I go to court for the very first time. And the prosecutor, he's trying to get me to snitch because they didn't really want me. They wanted my boy, whom they had been trying to get for years, and they could not get him. And they said, they said, what is your relation to, so and so. I ain't gonna drop no names. And I said, I don't know him. I lied, and I said, I don't know him. Yeah, I don't know him. I said, I was like, I don't know him personally. I met him through another contact, and that was the only reason why I was with him. And so the prosecutor was like, Judge, I think he's lying. I don't think he's telling us what we want to hear. And I think you need to keep him locked up until he tells us what we want to hear. So my heart just sank, because I'm like, all right, you already said it. You ain't getting out of here no time soon. And I'm like, and I ain't snitching. So, I just said, you know what, we're gonna rock with it. We're gonna do the time. And all of a sudden, like, this same public defender that they said it wasn't gonna do nothing for me, his brother started defending me like I was paying him, like I was paying him 6 figures. He was like, Judge, we have no record of him ever being in the state of Indiana. And, we have no trace of him being here. And he goes into this whole spiel, and he's like, Judge, I think he's telling the truth. And I'm like, this dude is like really fighting for me. So it was up to the judge. So the judge, called for, a little recess, and he was going to go back to his chambers to deliberate what he was going to do. So Now mind you, at this time, I have a class 6 felony. I forgot to mention that. That charge came with a class 6 felony. And so the judge comes back from his chambers, and my head is down because I'm already thinking I'm not getting out of here. I'm not getting out of here. And the judge comes in and he calls me by name and he says, "Can your parents get you a plane ticket?" And I looked up and I was like, "Yes, sir." And he said, "I want you to get out of my town and I don't want you to ever come back again." I said, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir." I said, I'll never come back. I promise I never come back." Fortunately, I ended up breaking that promise. So anyway, one of the things, I don't know if they still do this in Indiana, but at the time, in Wayne County, they had time and a half. So whatever you got locked up for, you would do half. And so, for instance, if you got a year, you would do 6 months. So they gave me 6 months, do 3, and I was coming up on my 3rd month there. And so 2 weeks later, I had reached my 3rd month and I got released. And don't let me forget this blessing. They dropped my class 6 felony to a class A misdemeanor. Like, I didn't even ask for that. But I would have been a felon. I would have been a felon had not God allowed that to happen in his mercy towards me. And so, unfortunately, God performs this miracle. I got out early, but as soon as I was free, I was right back to my old lifestyle. You see, with my lips, I said, "God, I would change." But with my heart, I said, "Not yet." And so I kept wearing the same mask and kept performing the same performance, and I kept paying the same price that comes with wearing masks that we were never meant to wear. And so, moving on, um, so I end up, fast forward, it's another part of my story. I am I'm 21 at the time. And so this is about a year after I had gotten released. I'm 21 at the time. I had an apartment with me, another one of my boys, nice apartment. And because we was partying way too much, both of us lose our job at the same time. And we had rent coming up. And so I didn't know how else to get money. So I went back to doing what I knew to do. And so one of my family members, he had a connection with somebody that worked at UPS. And so we transported some stuff through UPS to Indiana, the same city I told that judge I would never go back to. So I'm back in the same city trying to raise, because there was still a drought there, trying to raise the money that I need to, to pay for, pay for my rent. And a lot happens, and I can't go over all of this, but the stuff that I go down there with ends up getting stolen. And so now I'm trying to figure out, because I owe somebody money now, and I'm trying to figure out, what do I do? So I took the money that I had left and I bought some crack and I started selling it. And I realized that was my first time selling crack. And I realized that I was making more money selling crack than I ever had made selling cocaine, selling weed, selling any other stuff that I've ever sold before. And, and it's unfortunate because I'm destroying lives at the same time. And so fast forward in this story, Um, me and one of my boys, Carlos, we stand at this girl's house and we selling crack out of her house. And, she was in this, what's called a quadruplex, um, which, has two apartments downstairs and two apartments upstairs. And so she's in the upstairs apartment to the right. And you could always hear when somebody was coming in the door downstairs because there was just this loud, squeaking screen door that whenever you open the screen door, it would always be really loud. And so anyway, so just and typically what would happen if we hear the screen door and we hear the door downstairs open, then we know it's just one of the neighbors. But if we heard the screen door open and somebody saw us walking up the steps, generally, if a girl was already at the house, we already would know that it was a customer. And so anyway, me and my boy Carlos, we there and we bagging up crack. And we hear the screen door downstairs open. And we look at each other and say, customer. So you gonna get him? I'm gonna get him. We can like you get him. And so anyway, we just waiting for the person to come up the steps and knock on the door. And a period of time goes by, and 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 I don't know if it was him or it was me. I was like, you know, so one of us said, yo, we heard the screen door, but we never heard the door downstairs close, and we never heard the screen door reopen, for somebody to go for somebody going back out. And we look at each other, we were like, 5-0? And so, which is a terminology for, police, those of you who aren't from that lifestyle. So anyway, um, so he goes to the door and he opens up the door and he sticks his head out and he closes the door immediately and he locks it. He said, 5-0. I'm like, bro, quit playing, man. Quit playing. He's like, no, man, I'm serious. And he starts grabbing all of the stuff that he had and he's running to try to hide. And by that time I knew he was serious. And so anyway, I grab what I have. And, she had the girl we were staying with, um, her son had like this big, I forgot, it was like a transformer toy or something like that, and had this big battery pack on the back of it that was empty. So I took the battery pack off and I stuffed it. I stuffed what I had in there and put the battery pack back on. So, um, a couple minutes later, and he hid his, I don't even know where he hid his stuff, but he hid it somewhere. So the police, um, they knock on the door and they ask the girl that we're staying with, if she can come out. This is this is a white girl. You understand why I say that in a moment. And so in my mind, I'm sitting there, I'm thinking about how I can escape. I look at the balcony and I say, maybe I can hop off the balcony. And as I look over there, I already see flashlights in the back already. So I said, we're cornered. I'm like, we're cornered. And I'm saying, we're done. I said, you told God that if he got you out of the first one, that you would serve him. And you didn't. You told the judge you never come back to the city again. And you did. I said, you're done. You're done. First time I got caught with weed, I said, now you're going to get caught with crack cocaine. My friend's mom that I was telling you about earlier, she went to prison for 3 years for a 10 piece of crack. 3 years for a $10 piece of crack. And here I am, with a piece of crack like this and gone. So anyway, they she reopens the door and the police come behind her And and they said, we need you two to stand up. So we stood up, you know, they patted us down, cuffed us, and told us to sit down on the couch. We sat on the couch, and they started ransacking the house looking for stuff. And I just said to myself, it's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time before they find it. And so anyway, I don't know, what seemed like an eternity, you know, passed by. And the two or three officers that were searching the place, they came back to the living room where we were, and they said, there've been reports of crack being sold out of this place. But we've done some searching, and we don't find any crack. We don't see any scales, nothing like that. They said, but where's the weed? We can smell it. And then I got real honest. I was like, yes, sir. I said, yeah, we've been smoking weed, sir. Yes, we have. And all that we have left is right there in the ashtray. And it was a little blunt roach. And I said that's all we got right there. And literally that was all that we had. We literally were out at that moment. We ain't had no weed on us at that moment. And so he looked in the ashtray and he said, we ain't arresting nobody for no little roach. And they told us to get up, and they took the cuffs off. And they start walking towards the front door. And they said, y'all leave this nice white lady alone. And the first officer walks out, and the second officer, right before he walks out, he turns around and he said, you lucky that your fat-headed friend stuck his head out the door. He said, because we were just about to bring in the dogs. And he left. I think I was speechless on that couch for about an hour, because I knew how close, how close, how close, how close we came. How close I came, to going to prison and being locked up for a very long period of time. It's amazing through all of these years, at that time, I'm like 21, 22, something like that. In all of these years, I've been wearing all of these masks, trying to find myself, trying to figure out who I was, trying to establish myself, in different, different communities. But that's the thing about wearing masks. I don't care if it's one mask, two masks, three masks, doesn't really matter. When you wear a mask long enough, you don't end up knowing who you are anymore. And when I looked in the mirror at that time, I didn't know who I was. There was stuff that I got involved in that I don't think I ever would have got into. Like, I don't think I would have ever got into some of that stuff. I mean, you think I just like woke up one day, was like, yeah, this is something I want to do. Yeah, I want to be a pimp. I want to be a drug dealer. I want to get in gangs. I was like, no person just wakes up and wants to do that, you know. But I was searching for an identity. I was searching for who I was. And in the process, I was wearing all kind of masks, trying to figure out who I was. And so, um, I really want to leave you with some lessons to consider, as we close off part 3 of my testimony. Some core lessons I'm going to leave you with. When you refuse to let God define who you are, the world will keep offering you counterfeit identities, and you will pay the price for it with pieces of yourself every single time you take on one of the world's counterfeit identities. That's one of the lessons that I want to leave you with tonight. Another lesson that I want to leave you with are these really 3 reflection questions I want you to consider. 3 reflection questions. The first is this: what mask are you wearing to survive, and what is it costing you? What mask are you wearing to survive, and what is it costing you? That's the first reflection question. The second is this: what lines did you say you'd never cross, but now feel closer than ever? What lines did you say you will never cross, but you find yourself getting closer to them? Reflection question 2. Let's move on to 3. Most important one. What counterfeit identities have you accepted instead of waiting for your true identity that comes from God alone? What counterfeit identities have you accepted instead of waiting for your true identity that comes from God alone? You know, these are important questions to consider because, as I said in the opening statement, we all wear masks. And a lot of us wear masks in order to protect ourselves. But we find all too soon and too late that the very mask that we thought would protect us and give us true freedom oftentimes end up being the very chains that bind us behind the prison walls of false identities. False identities have a high cost and a lot of damage, oh, that we do to ourselves in the process of trying to discover who we are, and the mask that we put on in an effort to try to present ourselves to the world in a certain way. You know, if you are at a stage in your life that you are ready to take off the mask and find your true self, whatever that mask is, maybe you're hiding behind the mask of academics. You want to be looked at as the smartest person. Maybe you are hiding behind the mask of beauty. Maybe you look good and that's what your identity is. Maybe you are hiding behind the mask of the comedian. Everybody knows you as a funny person and you wear that mask very well, but inside you're hurting. If you are willing and you are ready to take the mask off and allow Christ to show you who you truly are, then in the comment section, I want you to put the word, Lord, unmask me. Lord, unmask me. Because he cannot show you your true identity until you allow him to unmask you and take away the false identities that you've been holding on to. Well, my friends, it has been a pleasure being with you in part 3 of my testimony, the high cost of false identities. I pray that you will tune in for part 4, my friends, which is going to air next Friday. Well, God bless you. Salute to all my brothers who are on the battlefield of manhood. It is a blessing being with you guys week after week. Please stay tuned for a private WhatsApp community just for men with different groups addressing different areas. I'm like so excited about this. Like, It's about to launch. It's about to, actually, by the time that you watch this video, it has already been launched, as a matter of fact. So anyway, much love to you, and tune in next time. God bless.